Hi, I'm Eliot, the IELTS expert at Magoosh, and I love helping students get the best scores they can on the IELTS exam. And so we're going to look at the writing section in this lesson and focus on Task 1 prompts that include bar charts. This is a tricky type of prompt, and so we're going to look at some tips on how to do your best on bar chart questions for Task 1, and we'll look at a sample essay thinking about how we can apply those tips so that you can do the best you can on this type of question. Let's take a look at bar chart questions for Task 1. So here's an example of a Task 1 question with two bar charts. Now keep in mind that you might have a mixture of two different types of visuals in your Task 1 prompts. In this video, since we're focusing on bar charts, our sample question only has that type of visual. Okay, but anyway, let's dive in here and take a look at our sample prompt quickly, and then we'll get to some tips on how to approach questions like this. Starting at the top, it says, the charts below give information about post-secondary education in 5 select countries and in the world as a whole. Okay, so here's kind of a summary sentence of the two visuals. Your Task 1 prompts will always have some type of summary for you right at the top there. Okay, then on the left side, we see a bar chart down here talking about post-secondary degree holders by nation, and we've got some different countries listed down here. And then we've got on the right side, looking at post-secondary degree holders worldwide. And we're looking at a date range between 1974 and 2014. Okay, now we're going to look closely at this prompt and look at a sample response to this question later on in this video. But before we get to that, let's get to some tips here, some tips on how to approach questions just like this one that you're looking at. All right, so number 1, as with any Task 1 question, your most important job is to describe the visuals accurately and efficiently. So for prompts with bar charts, that means you will need to identify all the variables on the chart, okay? And that's tough because on these bar charts, often there are a lot of different variables, a lot of different characteristics included in the bar chart itself. And our sample prompt certainly is no exception to that, okay? So in your response, and as you prepare your response for bar chart questions, your first job is to take an inventory of all of the different variables that you'll need to describe in your response about the chart, okay? Next, you need to, if possible, find shared variables. If you have two bar charts, or if you have a bar chart and different type of prompt, you're going to look for, okay, what information can I consolidate? That helps you to organize information instead of having a response that just seems like a list of bullet points with data that you're taking from the prompts. Okay, we'll take a look at how to do that in just a moment. And the last advice here for describing visuals accurately and efficiently is you have to try your best to paraphrase key terms whenever you possibly can. This is something that gives you a boost in your score for your Task 1 prompts when you can take some of the language that you see from the prompt, from the question itself, and translate it with synonyms or with other paraphrases that mean the same thing. It shows your range of accuracy and grammar when you do that. Again, we're going to look at how to do that with our sample prompt in just a moment. All right, so let's start with our first tip that we saw on our list there, identifying the variables. Well, what are the variables we need to describe from this set of bar graphs? First, we have a main category listed on the charts, okay, and that is post-secondary degree holders. What are post-secondary degree holders? These are people who have educational degrees beyond high school. Secondary education is high school, so a college degree or a graduate school degree would be an example of a post-secondary degree. Okay, that's our one piece of really important data that's shared between the two graphs here. All right, now on chart 1, we see that the data is limited to 1 year. Okay, 2014. On the second chart, we're focusing on a date range, okay, 1974 to 2014. And take note that these years are reported by decades, okay? So starting every 10 years, we get data in the second chart, ranging from 1974 all the way up to 2014, okay? Next, the next set of factors we have to report about in your response. We've got these countries. All right, in the first graph, all the information is listed by country. We have 5 countries listed there, and comparing it to the bar chart on the right, that one is only considering one population, the global population or the worldwide population within the date range that they provide. Okay, another contrast then, the first chart breaks down the percentage of post-secondary degree holders by these age cohorts. Okay, so these different age groups are highlighted with different colors on the bar chart to the left here, okay? The second chart simply reports the percentage of population. So these are key variables that need to be described in your report. So just like our sample prompt here, in all questions that include bar charts, they can be challenging because they often include a number of intersecting variables, just like we see here, where we've got age and countries, contrasted with the global population, the population worldwide. We've got different dates that we're considering. Okay, these are common features of bar charts with these intersecting and sometimes different variables that you have to consider across the different visuals you're considering for your question. And this complexity is why it's best to find variables that overlap, okay? So you want to practice consolidating your description of the variables where variables are shared across the 2 visuals you're considering, okay? So in our sample prompt here, which variables are shared? Well, as we discussed a moment ago, both charts focus on post-secondary degree holders, okay? So that's one area where these 2 charts share some information, okay? Both bar charts also report data by percentage of population. Okay, so there's some overlap there, and there should be ways in which we can describe some of the common features that we would contrast between these 2 charts in a similar way because we're discussing percentage of population on both graphs, on both charts. All right, we'll see an example of that when we look at the sample prompt, sample response in just a little bit. Okay, then lastly, we want to consider how we can paraphrase some of the terms that we see here, how we can earn some vocabulary and grammar points by changing around some of the language that we see on these charts in our response, okay? So the last tip is something you should do really on any Task 1 prompt, not just bar chart questions, and that is to paraphrase key terms, okay? What are some key words we could paraphrase in our sample prompt here? Well, a clear choice is post-secondary education, right? So secondary education, as we discussed, is high school. So in both charts, again, we're thinking about education that occurs after high school. This could be college or graduate school. So possible paraphrases could be higher education, college and university education, college and graduate school education. These would be different ways of talking about post-secondary degree holders, right? These people who hold degrees beyond high school. Okay, but also there are more possibilities beyond that. The word nation in the first visual would be another one to paraphrase with a replacement like country, okay? Degree holders could be described as graduates. All right, anything you can do to modify, change, even if you're just modifying the form of a word that you see in your visuals from your Task 1 prompts, you should do so. That can really help you to boost your score on your response. Now, so far, we've been just thinking about how to gather and think about the basic information that we need to report about these visuals we're looking at for this question. Let's just think about how we would apply some of these first tips that we've had for bar charts in a sample response. So down below, we've got the first paragraph. And in the first paragraph, that's really where we're going to present the basic information about the visuals that we're looking at for this question. Let's just read through paragraph 1. It says, the first graph breaks down national college and university graduation rates by age group in Canada, South Korea, Latvia, China, and South Africa. The second graph shows growth in higher education worldwide from 1974 to 2014. Both graphs express differences by the percentage of population. Okay, notice a couple of things. We used some of our paraphrases, right? We made some combinations where we're comparing how both bar charts show the information by percentage of population. That's something that's shared, and it helps us to describe that information very efficiently. Okay, we've decided to devote the first sentence to the first visual on the left and the second sentence to the second bar chart on the right. That's a good way to approach it for this particular question, but notice how we have in our first paragraph here described all of the different variables that are included. We've got the countries, we've got the years, we've got the age group, at least a general description that first chart is broken down by age group, and we've got our nice paraphrases of post-secondary degree holders. Oh, and we also, of course, discussed this percentage of population. So all the key information is summarized up front. Okay, so our tips clearly applied here in this first paragraph response to our sample question. But let's continue, because this task one response is about far more than just summarizing this basic information. We also need to report on the most important features of those bar charts. So how do we go about that? All right, well, with bar charts, it's pretty straightforward. Your job is to select the most important data, and that is almost always going to follow these guidelines. You're going to look for highs and lows in the data. You're going to look for changes, contrasts, or trends. So let's go back to our sample question and look for those things and see what kinds of data we would pull out from the two bar charts in our question. Okay, so let's take a really close look at the first chart here. That'll help us to think through what we say is the most important data from it. So we notice some highs and some lows. Okay, notice in general, the age group 25 to 35, okay, this group in red right there, contains the most post-secondary degree holders. Even though it comes in second in Canada, still, we would have to say that the largest number of post-secondary degree holders among all countries listed here is that group. That would be a really good piece of data to report. Okay, now South Africa is the big exception in all of the data, and that's something we would have to mention, that it appears most of the data is pretty consistent among Canada, South Korea, Latvia, China, and South Africa is a little bit of an outlier there. All right, we'll get to that in a moment. First of all, just noticing, if we're looking for highs and lows, the high group here is certainly the 25 to 34-year-olds, okay? Conversely then, the oldest group has the fewest number of post-secondary degree holders, okay? And South Africa is once again the exception there, but if we look at this purple group, okay, across the different countries, we would probably want to note in our response that this age group has the lowest number of post-secondary degree holders, right? Okay, so looking for highs and lows. But both charts show some notable trends. In general, the first chart shows that the percentage of degree holders decreases as age range decreases. South Africa and even Canada run against this trend somewhat, right? Since 25 to 34-year-old group is actually second place in Canada, but we could at least say that the two oldest groups have the lowest percentage overall in 4 of the 5 countries. Okay, looking at the second chart, the trend is very straightforward. Post-secondary degrees were on the rise globally from 1974 to 2014. We've got that sort of upward swing occurring over these years. That's very clear. We'd certainly have to report about that. But also notice that we could discuss a change in the second graph, a change that seemed to occur if we focus in on these two time frames that are there. So from 1974 to 94, the rise in post-secondary degree holders is fairly slow. But from 1994 to 2014, the percentage of post-degree holders rises much more rapidly, right? This is a significant trend that occurs here in the last years noted on this chart, that it seems to be that the number of post-secondary degree holders is rising much more rapidly than it was before. Okay, another thing to take note of. This would be a good piece of information to discuss in your response about this set of visuals, okay? So let's look at that. Let's look at our sample response some more. We already looked at paragraph 1. Now let's go back and think about how we would pull all of this important data we noticed into a response about these bar charts. Okay, so we're going to look at how to consolidate all this information here. Let's just read the paragraph here, paragraph 2, and point out a couple of things that we've done with it. So it says, in graph 1, younger people generally are more likely to have advanced degrees, even in countries with very different higher education rates. Okay, so making a generalization, even though it doesn't work for all groups, in general, we'd say that the trend is for younger people to have more, they are more likely to have advanced degrees in these countries, right? Similarly, the second graph shows that in the past few decades, okay, so looking at the last decades on the chart, more and more people have been getting college or university degrees. So what we've done there in this first part, we've consolidated some trends, some data between the two charts. If we say younger people have more post-secondary degrees, that also aligns with the idea that more people generally in recent years have been getting these degrees, have been graduating from college or universities after high school, okay? Continuing. Down here in the paragraph, students ages 25 to 34 have the highest graduation rates everywhere except Canada, where it's the second highest, and South Africa, second lowest. People ages 45 to 54 and 55 to 64 have the third and fourth highest graduation rates, respectively, everywhere except South Africa. Okay, we keep having to say except South Africa. It's the exception among all of the things we're looking at here on both charts, really. And we can still make some generalizations that are useful and helpful for our discussion, right? We're thinking about these older age groups here, the green and the purple on the first chart. They are the least likely, or they are the ones who achieve the fewest number of postgraduate degrees as a percentage of the population. Okay, so we are starting to report about some of this key data that we're pulling out from our charts. But let's continue. Reading on in paragraph 3, in the second infographic, okay, so infographic, another way of saying visual, you can use that in your reports. We see higher education attainment increase consistently. Now we're pulling out this trend we talked about earlier as one of the key ones from the second graph. From 1974 to 94, these increases are modest at just 2 to 3 points per decade. However, from there, rates of college and university graduation surge across the globe. Okay, surge, they increase rapidly, jumping from 15% to 24% from 94 to 2004, and then up to 36% in 2014. This gentle increase, followed by a more recent surge, is perhaps the best reflected in Latvia's stats from the first chart. Now we get to make a comparison. We talk generally about the really major trend that occurs in the second graph, and then we look back here, okay, which country is it most consistent with? And we can make that comparison. So Latvia is the country that most closely resembles this global trend, but then we can qualify because there are other instances too. And we can say, but it can be seen to some degree in every country except South Africa. Okay, so this is a good response highlighting the major information, the key data that we've pulled out from both graphs. And notice how in our paragraph 2 and paragraph 3, we've made comparisons. We've tried to consolidate some of the data and making sure that it's organized, that we're not just listing a bunch of facts and listing a bunch of random data from both charts, but thinking through how they work together in some way to tell a story. Okay, so reviewing our tips we've looked at so far, the first thing we do is we need to describe the visual completely, accurately, efficiently by consolidating information. And then we need to be really skilled at trying to find these major highs and lows, changes, contrasts, trends in the bar charts that we're looking at, okay? Now, of course, the last thing that's always important in your Task 1 prompts is to know key vocabulary, things that are going to help you describe these trends, these highs and lows, these different parts of bar graphs in an accurate way. So to do all of this, it's going to require you to have vocabulary to describe the features that we've discussed in this lesson. Now, if you follow the link in the notes below this lesson, it's going to take you to a page that includes some vocabulary resources that will help you with bar charts and other types of Task 1 prompts. Questions. You can also find a practice bar chart question and a sample response to that question so that you can get some extra practice trying to use the tips and skills that we've covered in this lesson. So follow that link that you see below and go take advantage of those resources, okay? Now, before we finish this lesson, I'm going to put up the full essay that we looked at in this lesson so you can read it all in one place. So after that full response is up on the screen for a few seconds, then we'll move on and finish out the lesson. All right, I hope you liked the video. If you want more IELTS writing tips and strategies, check out these videos on the left, and I'll see you in the next lesson.